All right, well, we are heading into part 3 of Ecclesiastes, and if you're here for the first time, this is actually a great time to come and be a part of this series, because we're going to see for the first time today, Solomon actually talk about God, actually look up above just what's under the sun to see what God is doing and to see how God is working in his life. So this is really a great time to be here for this series. The Ecclesiastes series, I've probably gotten the most feedback from any series we've done here at the church. And it's just because it's so practical to our lives. It's going to ask the questions that we ask. It's going to dig into some of the issues that we all have thought or felt, especially here recently. Now, whenever I have on a TV show called Shark Tank, if you don't know Shark Tank, it's like 5 investors and people come and they pitch different ideas for products and businesses and services and apps and all kinds of different things. And people have the opportunity to invest. It's these big known people like Mark Cuban and just these super rich billionaires and millionaires and people like that. I love the show, but Angie gets nervous every single time I'm watching it. And you might be able to guess why. It's because I have been known to quite frequently buy this stuff that I'm watching on the show. I've got, I know Third Wave water, which is like these little packets that I put into my reservoir that I use to make my lattes. And it's supposed to make the water more like, artesian water that you would get. And I bought like a huge supply because it was a better deal. If you bought, like the more you bought, the more you saved. And I'm pretty sure it tastes exactly the same, I got another thing where these little stirs, and you can put it into a glass of wine. And I said a glass of wine before I get emails, just a glass of wine. And I get headaches from even like half a glass of red wine. If I do this little stir, it works. I don't get the headaches. And so that one has worked well. I've got all kinds of different products around my house that I've found from Shark Tank. And, some have really been great. Others just didn't satisfy at all. As we talk about Solomon, Solomon's the person who bought it all. He tried it all, everything that the world had to offer. And in the end, he said that it was meaningless. He said that it was vanity. He tended to look under the sun. In fact, we're finishing up chapter 2 today. And like I said, not until the very last few verses of chapter 2 is he going to actually mention and look up to God for the first time. So today's message series is going to be titled, How an UpLook Can Change Your Outlook. We've got notes in the bulletin. We've got notes on our app that you can follow along. There's a few different ways. I would love for you to kind of be connected with this message. There was a young boy who has done something that I probably did at some stage in my life. And I can just imagine my nephew Cal doing this for sure. And, what do? You grab a baseball in your mind. You're imagining that, you're in Yankee Stadium and you're at home plate and it's the World Series and there's bases loaded and you're down by a few runs and you throw the ball up and he says, I'm the greatest hitter ever. And he swings. He says, strike one. And he goes again. He goes, I'm the greatest batter ever. And he throws it up and he swings. Strike two. Well, he grabs it a third time. He throws it up and he swings and he misses it. And he goes strike three. And he yells, I'm the greatest pitcher in the world. You see, that's an optimist. He looks at every situation to find the best in life, the joy in life. If Solomon were to do that, I think maybe even after the first swing and miss, he would just say, I quit. Meaningless, vanity. What's the point of this game? And he would walk away. And that's what we're going to see today is that Solomon was kind of stuck in this stage of pessimism as he continued to look at everything that was under the sun. Today we're in Ecclesiastes 2. If you have your Bibles, we're going to look in chapter chapter 2, verse 12. The main version that I'm going to work from today is the New King James Version. I just like the way a lot of the wording works. A lot of people have been telling me that the Amplified has been great for them during the Ecclesiastes series especially, and I've been looking over it and I agree. It's got some really great ways as you're reading this on your own to understand the different ways that words could be translated. We're going to be looking at the New King James Version most of the time today. Verse 12. Then I turned to, what's it say? I turned to myself to consider. That's where we're going to start today's message, okay? Solomon is going to turn to himself to start and understand the purpose and meaning of life. This is his outlook, is right now he is looking inward. Previously, Solomon had tried all kinds of different experiments on life. He had tried wealth. He had fame. He had education. He was a philosopher. He tried the finest wine. He had probably some of the biggest parties that mankind has ever seen. And yes, he tried many, many, many women as recorded in scriptures. But with every try, the hole inside of him seemed to just get bigger and bigger. Life had promised so much, but in the end, it was vanity or it was meaningless. Then I turned to myself to consider wisdom and madness and folly. And that's the comparison. If you're taking notes, write this down. He's looking at wisdom versus, let's just say, foolishness. Wisdom versus madness. Wisdom versus folly. And he says, for what can man do who succeeds the king? Only what he has already done. Then I saw that wisdom excels folly as light excels darkness. The wise man's eyes are in his head, but the fool walks in darkness. Yet I myself perceive that the same event happens to them all. And we'll break this down in a second. So I said in my heart, as it happens to the fool, it also happens to me. And why was I then more wise? Then I said in my heart, this also is vanity. For there is no more remembrance of the wise man than of the fool forever. Since all that now is will be forgotten in the days to come. And how does a wise man die? As a fool. And this comparison of wisdom and foolishness. He's not speaking to a fool as a person who is uneducated. He is speaking to the fool as a person who has no care for life. He's the que sera, sera. Whatever will happen, will happen. Whatever will be, will be. He's carefree. When he's talking about wisdom here, he's talking about the person who has the calculated, planned order to their life. You know, the people who say, I've got my 20-year plan when they're, 20 years old and they've got everything planned out to the day, which we all know exactly how well that goes. They have their plans, they have their vision. But Solomon says, when we look in verse 14, the wise man's eyes are in his head, but the fool walks in darkness. So you live your life aware with both eyes open is all he's simply saying here. He's prepared. He's thoughtful. The steps that he takes are calculated and planned. But he digs a little bit deeper and says, yet I myself perceived that the same event happens to them all. What is the same things that happen to us all? Well, it's death and taxes, right? Death happens to everybody. 1 out of 1 people will die. Even Lazarus. Lazarus was raised from the dead, but I don't think he's still here. So eventually Lazarus did die. So with the exception of, Jesus did die on the cross, but now he's resurrected. That's kind of, a different category. But for everybody else in the history of mankind and the future of mankind, all of us here today, all of us at some point will have an earthly death. So what's the difference? Do you ever think like, this could be my last meal? This past week, we had some just amazing meals while being on vacation. But at no point do we sit around and be like, hey guys, this could be our last meal. Might as well enjoy this seared tuna because it's, we didn't do that. I actually found some articles. I was trying to find, people like last meals. And one of the ones that I found was an old article, and it was the meal. They had a private meal for everyone in London who was getting on the Concorde supersonic jet, and how there was just champagne, and there was desserts, and there was all this food, and what they didn't realize was they were all having their last meal together. We don't know when that's going to happen. Maybe on the Titanic, there were some people who realized, hey, let's just go get all the best food, and let's get all the best steaks from the freezers, because this is it, guys. But we don't know. We don't want to have that perspective. Time tarnishes all things. It makes all things forgettables. We say in sports that records are made to be broken. They say one of the greatest World Series in the history of baseball is the 1955 World Series. Does anybody actually recall who was in the greatest World Series in the history of baseball in 1955? I don't know. I do know that it was the Brooklyn Dodgers versus the New York Yankees. And it was the last game that Joe Robinson played in. And it was just this amazing game where he caught, a home run that was going over the home run fence, and he brought it back for the Brooklyn Dodgers to win, and just all these great, amazing players, perhaps Babe Ruth, that were in that. But we don't remember these things, the greatest World Series in the history of the game. Who remembers this guy? John Gilbert. Come on, guys. In the 1920s, he was the heartthrob of America. I mean, just look at that mustache. It's just like all these things that we make such a big deal about. It's like time tarnishes all things. Here's a record breaker for you. I love Steph Curry. He just passed 3,000 three-pointers for the first time in, NBA history. He's broken record after record after record. I know there's all debates on who's the GOAT, the greatest of basketball. And I would say, Gannon, can we say NBA skills trainer, best shooter in the history of basketball? All right, we got Gannon Baker on record saying that on video, so it's good. Records are made to be broken. He's pointing to his Air Jordan back there. I love it. Time tarnishes all things, these things that we put so much emphasis. Solomon's realizing that as he gets towards the later parts of his life, what significance is there in all of that? Look at verse 17. Therefore I hated life because the work that was done under the sun was distressing to me. For all is vanity or meaningless in grasping for the wind. The depth of depression that's in his mind is seen very clearly in this verse. After all he tried, the hole is only getting bigger. His outlook remains under the sun. Verse 18. Then I hated all my labor in which I had toiled under the sun, because I must leave it to the man who will come after me. And who knows whether he will be wise or a fool? Who is he speaking of here? His son. Yeah, he's speaking of his inheritance. He's speaking of his next generation. Yet he will rule over all my labor in which I toiled, in which I have shown myself wise under the sun. But this also is what? Vanity. Therefore I turned my heart and despaired all of the labor in which I toiled under the sun. For there is a man whose labor is with wisdom, knowledge, and skill. Yet he must leave his heritage to a man who has not labored for it. This also is vanity and a great evil. For what has man for all his labor and for the striving of his heart with which he has toiled? What? Under the sun. That horizontal view of what we can see, what is tangible, what can be touched. Solomon was, in fact, just a world-renowned in the anthems of history builder. He just built amazing things, the temple, the road systems, sewage systems, water systems, aqueducts, pools, irrigation. I mean, you name it, and he built it, and he did it very, very well. And we also are reminded he probably wasn't doing a lot of swinging of hammers in the building of all this stuff, but he was directing. We need those leaders who can have that vision. You could also probably say that he was a workaholic. He thought that he could feel better by just getting this next project done, by building a little bit more, by this next accomplishment. But again, none of it fulfilled him. Perhaps the thought that I could pass this down to the next generation. My life, I know my years are coming to an end, but my son can carry this on. My legacy will continue. People won't forget me. But then he has this thought, but what if my son is a fool? Have you ever had that thought before? What if my daughter just squanders all the hard work that I've done? It's kind of funny to think about. We have all these ideas, but what if? What if my son's the prodigal son and just goes and spends it on the world and on personal pleasures and finds himself, passed out in the corner with nothing left to show for all the hard work that I've done? In fact, as we look forward in Scripture just a little bit, we can see that his son, Rehoboam, did just about that. Now, he wasn't perhaps the partier, but he tried to be an even more powerful ruler than his father. And he did that by increasing the taxes on the land, trying to increase his wealth to show that he was greater than his father. And he actually split the nation of Israel in two. And the tribes were split because of his son. In one generation, it tells us in Scripture that all can be lost. Verse 23, as we continue. For all of his days are sorrowful, and his work burdensome. Even in the night his heart takes no rest. This also is vanity. What good is it to work all day and then to lay awake all night thinking about the work that has to be done? Can I tell you, I do that way too often. In fact, this past week, and I got some pictures here in a second, but the room that we had in Costa Rica, I woke up to like a 30-foot wide piece of glass, probably 12 feet high, and I would still, by about night 6, thinking of all the things that I had to get done before Sunday, all the things that in the midst of that beauty of creation, I found myself still just thinking. And that's what he's saying is like, what is the point of this? If all day long we work just to worry all night long, think about the bottom line, think about all life requires, and what do we get in return? Solomon had hard work, but he also had worry and anxiety in return. No matter what pathway we take, and this was the message I gave 2 weeks ago, whatever pathway on life that we take, we can find that all the world has to offer in the end can be empty. The work, the inheritance, whatever direction we go. All right, I'm glad there's more verses. Because so far, if I were to end the message here, this would not be where we would want, the message to take us for today. He finally changes his outlook. He finally looks up for the very first time. You see, I've got a picture here, the Sandia Mountains. And it's amazing how many different mountain ranges. This one's outside of Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I remember driving past this. We stopped in Albuquerque for dinner, and I was with my dad. We were able to take a picture of the mountains. And it's amazing how different these mountains are. This is the west over here. So we were coming from California, and the east would be over here. And if you look from the west, what you see is a very high, steep, barren desert landscape. And it just looks like a really unforgiving. You can see it's going up to the clouds quickly. And it's going up extremely steep. But if you were to come from the east, you see a very gradual incline with lush green. And I want this picture to give you the idea of the importance of perspective. Same set of mountains. You look at it from two different directions, and it's two completely different outcomes. And that's exactly what we see happening in these verses here in Solomon. I'll just give you another illustration. The spies, they came into the promised land. I tried to find some accurate pictures of that, actually. The one spies came in and said, we cannot attack these people. They are stronger than we are. All the people we saw there were of enormous size. It said, the children of the Nephilim. If you want to have that debate, come see John after. He loves talking about the Nephilim. And, but these giant people that came from descendants of angels in this really kind of, we don't understand part of the Bible that we're not going to continue talking about. And they're these giant people. But yet the same people, Joshua and Caleb, they came and saw them and said, we must march in immediately and take it. We are certainly able to conquer it. They said, you say too big to defeat. I say too big to miss. God is on our side. This is where we're supposed to go, and let's move through it. And I think we've all had those obstacles in life. You know, where maybe there's a time that even you and your spouse, or you and a friend, or you and a parent, or you and a coworker, you and a friend, you see the same situation. You say, no, it's not possible. Oh, it's absolutely possible. You know, through God, all things are possible. From two different perspectives, and Solomon does that with his entire life. Same life, two perspectives. Looking at life with God in view, and looking at life by looking inwardly or looking outwardly on what's under the sun. For the first time, we're going to see him mention God here in a few moments. If you're taking notes, we're going to look at the three truths of life's journey. The three truths of life's journey. And the first one is, creation cannot produce satisfaction. It says in verse 24, nothing is better for a man than that he should eat and drink, and that his soul should enjoy good in his labor. This also I saw was from the hand of God, that even in creation it cannot produce satisfaction. Danielle, did I skip over our pictures? I did. If it's funny, Danielle is on the computer and she was with us this week. And if creation could just produce pure happiness, go ahead and bring up some pictures. This week would have done it for us. So this is, it came out really dark. This is me and my wife Angie and Danielle and Brad. And we had just gotten to Costa Rica, and you could just see just this beautiful creation. The next picture is, this was actually my favorite picture perhaps of the week. And this was 6 macaws flying in pairs. And macaws are like the parrot-looking birds that can talk, and they are incredibly loud. They love to yell all morning long. And but just a beautiful picture from outside the pool. And this is when we were in what was it, Brad? The park? Manuel Antonio National Park. And we got to see monkeys, and then our guide would just show us God's amazing creation. Is that the Jesus one? Yep, that's the Jesus. It's called the Jesus reptile, whatever, because he can walk on water. He runs across the water, you know, and it was just beautiful. You can see the monkeys actually in the top corner of that picture there behind Angie and I. And so just got to see this beautiful creation. As beautiful as creation is, as much joy as creation can bring us, creation inherently in itself, by just going and being in nature, which is a great place to be, doesn't produce satisfaction. And I want to kind of do something, and I want to look at this verse of verse 24, where it says, nothing is better for a man than he should eat, drink, and that his soul should enjoy good in his labor. And actually, I really studied this text a lot, and I'm going to share with you a translation change that I think is very relevant to understanding the meaning of this verse. As I really looked at the Hebrew, and I read some commentaries, and I was careful to say this to you, but I believe, and other scholars would agree with this, that a good translation would be this: nothing is better for a man than he should eat, drink, and that his soul should enjoy good in his labor. There is nothing inside of us that will give us enough joy to carry through life. There's not enough wealth. There's not enough success. There's not even enough family, good times, and food and drink and vacations to give us that enjoyment. And it says in verse 25, for who can eat or who can have enjoyment more than I? Someone saying, I had the biggest parties. I had the most gold. I had the best, wheels on a chariot that anybody's ever seen. Whatever it was, he had it. Once again, as I dug into this, let me share with you a modification of the translation that I think is really true to what the text is saying. For who can eat or who can have enjoyment apart from him? The word Elohim is in the original text, and so I don't know why they don't have that in some of the translations. Some do. For who can eat or who can have enjoyment apart from Elohim, apart from God, apart from him? And as we see that in that text, the question that he is asking is, how can we try and have enjoyment in life apart from God when we're not connected to God? Without putting God in the center of our life, it will never satisfy. Many people know I did hospice here in Brevard as the church was getting started, before the church started. I remember one house that was on the beach that I came into, and I was there a few different times. We actually ended up, after the man passed, doing a kind of an impromptu service in this giant atrium. In the room that he had passed in, it was just gorgeous ocean views. Literally, butlers met me at the door every time that I came. There was multiple staff in the room. I mean, you name it, and this person had it. This huge, large entrance. When I came into the room, and he was still talking the first week that I was with him, and one of the first things he said to me was, "Did they tell you where all my paintings came from?" And I was like, "No, we didn't talk about that. I just came in to, get to know you." And he's like, "Well, go have them explain the paintings to me, and you'll know how important my life was." And I remember just thinking that was so interesting. And they showed me, this painting's from here, and this painting's 400 years old, and this one's 600 years old, and this one came from France, and all these different things. And as I'm coming in there as a chaplain to provide care for a man on hospice, a man who was coming to the final days of his life, he wanted me to understand how important he was. As I talked with family, and I was trying to understand who he was, something that one person said to me as I'm looking at the different pictures. And I said, "Hey, as I see all these pictures, I just got to ask this question. Did he ever smile?" And everyone just kind of got quiet, like I had said the thing that wasn't supposed to be said. And I saw literally a tear from his wife's eye, and she said, "No, he never really smiled." You see, Solomon still exists today. People who have achieved so much, and they're trying to find importance, they're trying to find meaning. But yet there was no joy in all that he was able to accomplish, even here. It brings us to our second truth. God gives wisdom and joy as a gift. For God gives wisdom and knowledge and joy to a man who is good in his sight. Some of you might still think of God as this angry old man who never smiled and who's waiting for you to do something wrong so he can throw lightning bolts at you or make your life go bad or to make you get a flat tire on the way to the important event or whatever it is. Some people, perhaps that's still your image, that that's who God is. This angry old man who's trying to catch you and find you when you do something wrong. But yet, that's not what the Bible describes to us. It describes to us the father who, when his son went out and did squander all of his inheritance and spent all of his money and went and did parties and ruined the family name, that when he came back to his father, he ran out to him and loved him and forgave him and threw a party for him and gave him all that he had to offer. That's who God is, because that's who I would want to be as a father. Is that even when my kids make mistakes, I'm not looking to get my kids in trouble, but I'm looking to give them the best life that they possibly can. Now, sometimes that requires correction, but I want to love my kids, and I want to forgive my kids, and I want to give them the best that they've ever done. This is something we've been saying here at Rock Harbor for a few months now. Joy is not found by direct pursuit. Joy is not found by watching the advertising and going to get that next shiny new object that promises you to finally be happy. But joy is found by pursuing Jesus. When our outlook becomes an uplook and we see God in the midst of everything. Have you noticed that in no part of these messages have I ever said that wealth, that parties, that success, that building, that any of those things are wrong. But when we don't see Christ in the midst of what he's called us to do and who he's called us to be, it simply is vanity and meaningless. At no point have we actually condemned something as like, oh, don't do that lifestyle. No, we haven't done any of that. But we're trying to find meaning in all of it. Paul wrote to Timothy, the young pastor of the early church, "Teach those who are rich in this world not to be proud and not to trust in their money." In other words, trust in themselves, which is so unreliable. Their trust should be in God, who richly gives us all we need for our enjoyment. I mean, he's literally telling them, here's the instructions that tell people who have resources, who have means, that we should enjoy our work. I absolutely love what I do. In fact, it was hard for me this week not to do more sermon prep during the week. I was trying to take a week off. But I enjoy what I get to do. I love what I get to do. I love to get a chance to go through and look at the Hebrew and prepare the text. Notice in verse 24, it says what? I think I underlined it. Eat, drink, and labor. The mundane, everyday activities. To enjoy them can be a gift from God. It depends on your perspective. If you put God and Christ in the middle of all that you do, we can have joy in the midst of the mundane. A Boston newspaper, I found an article, a lady for 40 years as an office janitor. They said in the article, they asked her the question, you must get bored doing the same thing every day for 40 years. She says, I don't get bored. I take care of God's people. I use my hands, I use my mop to clean God's creation. I pray for every seat. I pray for every desk. I pray for every person, and I pray for every place that I clean. She goes, I bring the presence of God and the Holy Spirit into my work every single day with me. I have the greatest job in the world. 40 years, she cleaned the same office, day after day after day. But that was her perspective. Which brings us to our final truth for today. God cares for those who seek him. Verse 26, for God gives wisdom and knowledge and joy to a man who is good in his sight. But to the sinner, he gives the work of gathering and collecting, that he may give to him who is good before God. This also is vanity and grasping for the wind. All right, so this is an interesting irony on the acquisition of wealth. Solomon notices something that God makes sure that all the ungodly produce will eventually be given for God's good. The largest young life camp in the entire world is in Washington State. I've got a picture of it. It's the Washington Family Ranch. It was donated by the government because they didn't know what to do with it. Because it was that crazy guy that had a special on Netflix that had 100 Rolls Royces and created a cult with a huge following and had all these crazy things that were happening there. And they didn't know what to do with the property. Once the guy was arrested and everything was disbanded and everything was exposed, they didn't know what to do with this property. And so someone said, well, what if we donate it to an organization? And Young Life said, we'll take it. And they have now built the largest, they got all this property for free. Absolutely for free. You see, this land that was bought and purchased and built for the purpose of taking advantage of young women, for taking advantage of many, many people, taking all of people's wells, ruining people's lives. What Satan intended for bad, God has been able to use for good. I actually had a friend, my Young Life leader was one of the people who went to look at this facility, and they walked into the one room they were told some of the worst physical acts were done in. And they get up there and they're like, what is going on with the ceiling? And it was a high ceiling like this, and they just couldn't figure it out. And they were trying to shine a light, and it looked like it was a black moving ceiling. Someone had a little light stick, and they cracked it and they threw it up to the ceiling. And when it hit, locusts just began to fly everywhere. So yeah, they burned that building down and they rebuilt it. As you can tell, there's some new buildings, but they reclaimed that property. Can I tell you that this is what God does? And this is what God can do in your life. God takes what was once used for another purpose, and he's going to use it for his good. Have you ever heard of the Glen Erie Castle? It was built in 1871 by General Williams Jackson Palmer. He was a staunch atheist and would declare and write against God and the Christian faith over and over and over again. He built this 35-bedroom castle for his wife so she would move from London and feel at home in Colorado Springs. She stayed there for a week and said, "There's no one here. I want to go back home." The property after he died was donated to the Navigators, and to this day, it's used as a Christian conference center for people to come to Colorado Springs, come to the mountains, and hear the name of Jesus. The home of Voltaire, one of the most famous atheists who loved to quote Ecclesiastes in his writings, one of the most famous atheists in the history of mankind, his beautiful home, he had said in 1778, within 100 years, Christianity would be swept out of existence. Within 50 years, the Geneva Bible Society was printing Bibles in his home and donating them all over Europe. See, this is what God does. God, and Solomon was recognizing this. He was saying that if we please God, if we bring God into everything that we do in life, we will find meaning. But if you live for yourself, there won't be that legacy. There won't be that continuation. Jesus said, "Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all will be given to you." You see, that's what it means to find thanks. And I'm not asking you to swallow a pill and that all the bad days will go away. I've had bad stuff happen. This week, I've had some things with some family friends, and I have cried and I have wept over just brokenness in our world. But I'm inviting you to be courageous and to work to understand the blessings and curses of our stories. That we can remember who we are. We can remember whose you are. Perhaps entering into the suffering of our past. Be able to recognize the work that God is doing in our present. To know that there's a holy work that God wants to do in you. He wants to give you a new perspective. He doesn't want you just stuck looking under the sun, but he wants to give you a new outlook that's looking up in all that we do. That we live in a fallen and broken world. We've all been hurt. Many of us have hurt others. Some have been betrayed and left alone to go through life. Some of you have been so hurt that you don't have joy or delight in your life. You only feel comfortable when you're in this protection mode. And to smile or to go out would actually make you seem weak. But Jesus didn't come into the world to condemn the world, but he came in the world to give it life. He will restore our life. And in life, we can have truth and we can have freedom. You see, as I've been studying this week and working on the message, I am more convinced than ever that healing and joy is not about walking over the chasms of suffering or grief, but about finding the faith to believe that we can, even in our sorrow, even in the midst of our bad days, that even on the days that it seems like we're just plunging into an abyss, that we can understand that we can find God there. That's the perspective that this text gives us. It's not this glossy, just come and, if you guys donate more to the church, life's going to be better this year. No, it's not that false truth. But it's the truths that we can see in this text. That Jesus Christ is there with us when we're weeping. He's there with us when we're in joy. It's only there that we will find freedom. You will find laughter. We will find gratitude and joy. That finding this healing and joy is by bringing Christ into our workplace. By bringing Christ into our marriages. Bringing Christ into every single aspect of our life. But to do that, it's hard. Sometimes you have to let that old life die. That old perspective die. That we can understand that this, unreconciled grief that we carry with us, that it's just continuing to change our outlook and not letting us see God in the midst of it. But something inside of us tells us it's too dangerous to bring Christ into this part of my life. Well, I'm okay with Jesus on Sunday mornings, but my Friday nights, I want to kind of keep Jesus free. It's scary and dangerous sometimes to let Jesus enter into the whole truth of our story, of our lives, on who we are. Will it be too much? Will relationships be broken? Will we lose something, we wonder, by bringing Jesus in? These are legitimate questions, and sometimes the answers are hard. But I promise you, when Jesus is there, that Jesus is always truth, and the truth will set you free. Jesus is waiting for you. The truth is often heart-wrenching at first, but it always sets you free. And maybe it's free to grieve. Maybe it's free to lament. Maybe it's free to weep. But ultimately, it brings us to a place where we can dance and have joy with him. Would you pray with me? God, I know that many of us have tried much that the world has to offer. Some of us even deal with things that, whether we realize it or not, are addictions in our lives from food or alcohol, drugs or work or, gaming, even fishing can become an addiction when it takes our perspective away from you. God, I know that we tried this attempt to grasp and just control for ourselves. But Lord, in the end, it's just foolishness. It's just foolishness. God, I'm so thankful that the Apostle Paul reminds us that the message of the cross perhaps is foolishness, absurd, illogical. To those who have a perspective of Jesus Christ coming and dying on a cross. But God, I'm so thankful that we can see from the perspective that you dying on the cross was far from foolishness, but it was God's grace being acted out for us. It was the manifestation of the power of God. That God, in that moment, we could see you at work. That God, that is where you ultimately came and you gave your life so that we could no longer walk in darkness, but we could walk in the light. God, I'm so thankful that you have the ability to redeem our stories wherever we are, wherever we've tried to keep you out from. That God, that I pray today that we let you in. God, I know as different people have been hearing this message, that there's people that are hearing this in their car, they're hearing this at home, they're hearing this here in the church. That there's different people that you've been speaking to, and that you've been specifically saying, let me into your heart. Let me into your work. Let me into your hobbies. That Jesus, you want to be with us in all areas. That God, that we can find so much more meaning in life when we see you working through those areas. That God, that you can use us just the way that you've built us so that we can serve you for a purpose. God, I pray that this morning that if there's anyone here and they're just wondering if they're walking with you, that today they can leave here and know for sure that they don't have to segment Jesus just to a Sunday morning, but they have the opportunity to walk with you every single day of our lives. If that's you, I just pray this morning that you just open your heart up and say, Jesus, come in to my heart and take it all. I'm not going to hold back any part of my heart from you, but I open up every single part for you. God, thank you for the work that you're doing. God, thank you that we can enjoy every part of life with you. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.